Hi everyone, so my name's Lisa Forte and I specialise in helping companies prepare for a cyber attack. That's what I do professionally. However, what occupies a lot of my time, effort, energy and money is climbing large mountains. And that's where I'm actually going to start today's talk, because there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from climbing mountains. And the first story that I want to convey to you is actually one where I make a lot of mistakes. To my peril. So I've just come back from the Andes, climbing some big 6,000 meter peaks, which is I think 21,000 feet, 20,000 feet, something like that. And one of the mountains that I set out to climb was a pretty big challenge. And I'd prepared loads for it. I looked at the plans, I looked at what other climbers had done. Unfortunately, there had been a number of deaths that season on this mountain. I looked at what happened in those situations, I talked to people. I thought, Lisa, you were really prepared, like we can take this on. So I checked the weather and everything seems fine, and it takes about 3 days to climb to this place here, which is the high camp, sitting just shy of 6,000 meters, I think it was 5,900. And we get there and this beautiful evening meets us, as you can see. The sky is clear, there's no wind, it's literally perfect. And I thought, oh, this is in the bag. This is totally in the bag. We're going to summit tomorrow. It'll be fine. And the plan was, as often is the case on big mountains, you get to high camp, you make dinner, you melt some snow to make some water, and then you basically lie in your sleeping bag shivering, miserable. There's hardly any oxygen. I think there's like 50% of the oxygen at sea level at this level. And so you sort of lie there sort of gasping for breath, feeling awful, your heart rate's racing because you're at altitude, so you're basically doing a cardio workout, and you think this is absolutely awful, why am I doing this? And then you get up at midnight, in the dark, you put your head torch on, you get your boots on, your ice axes, your crampons, and you set off for what is usually about 7-8 hours of vertical climbing to get to the summit. And that's the plan. So I left at midnight, as per the plan. Everything was fine. And about 2 hours into our summit bid, the weather turned. And at 6,000 meters, when the weather turns, things get serious really fast. We were hit with absolutely unimaginable winds. It was probably one of the scariest moments of my life. It actually took us 24 hours to get off the summit ridge, because it was so terrible. The snow was so awful, we couldn't abseil off of the things we were trying to abseil off of. And I actually got frostbite. I got so cold that my tips of my fingers here and here turned black. Thankfully just surfaced, so they've regained their color, albeit not their sensation. And we got really, really lucky, because that's the sort of situation where loads of climbers have lost their lives. It can be that quick, that serious. And I'd made a plan. I had a plan, everything was fine. But one thing that we hadn't factored in, because nothing had indicated this was going to happen, was this storm. And suddenly, the plan that we had just didn't make sense anymore. It didn't work. It didn't make any sense at all, and we had to basically improvise with very little oxygen to make it work. So there's this famous saying that says the best alpinists are the ones with the worst memory, which is kind of true, because the only reason you go back into that situation is because you can't remember how awful it was the last time. And in some respects, I think that really resonates with cybersecurity people, because for a lot of our jobs, when we've been through an incident, I think we sort of forget how awful the entire thing was, and we go through it again. So what I'm going to quickly cover, and I appreciate we don't have a load of time, I'm going to talk about 3 key things that I think I've learned on the mountains that really also apply when I'm running cyber exercises for companies. So the first one, and there's loads of photos of mountain climbing throughout this, by the way, had to be done, is about being lucky versus being secure. And so, for example, on one mountain I was climbing in Peru, the ice was really bad. So when you climb ice, you put in these things that are called ice screws. And you basically screw them into the ice, you clip your rope into them, and you hope that somehow that doesn't mean you die. And if you fall, you somehow survive. So we put these in, and as we were coming down, the worst possible thing that can happen happened, and one of them popped out. I had 2 in, and that last one that was in, is why I'm still here presenting to you today. But there can be a bit of a distortion in your mind about what's happened there. And you could say, okay, well, that was totally secure. 2 was fine. 1 popped out, 1 stayed in. That's secure. I was fine, no one died, cool. Or was I lucky? Because the 2 things are not the same. And I often see this in cyber incidents as well. Things like the hackers didn't disable our key systems, or they didn't steal the PII, or they didn't manage to move laterally through the network. So we're secure. Are you secure, or were you just really lucky they didn't do that? Because the 2 things definitely are not the same thing. And this is predominantly a problem I see that manifests with your boards. And boards interpret that data as, well, our security means we're secure, and that's why they didn't do the thing that we were worried they would do. But they also need to understand that could just have been luck, and actually we're not secure in that respect. So it's the same thing for cyber incidents. The next thing is humans make mistakes. Human beings, every single one of us, are terrible at making decisions under pressure. Scientists have studied this, and they've actually found that under times of huge stress, our cognitive abilities are suppressed. So we're not actually processing and assimilating information like we would sitting here now. And you make bad decisions, and you miss out things, and you don't think about consequences. And all of this is true of every single human being sitting in this room. Okay? And it's true of your crisis management team. It's true of your management board. It's true of your SOC. Everybody will make bad decisions under stress. And I have made plenty. So this is me crossing a glacier, actually, on the way up to one of the mountains. And the problem with glaciers is that essentially they are moving. So as they're moving, albeit very, very slowly, the ice is collapsing, cracking, and they're very, very dangerous places. So you want to cross them typically early in the morning before the sun hits them, and you want to be roped up with somebody else. So if one of you falls in, someone else can hopefully save your life and not fall in as well. When you're at altitude, you basically feel like you're drunk most of the time. There's not enough oxygen to think things through properly. And so the decisions I was making, when I look back at some of the video that I recorded on my GoPro, I think, what the hell were you doing, Lisa? As I just sort of nonchalantly step across something with absolutely no consideration whatsoever for the ramifications. You're under pressure, you're not thinking clearly. I'm just not making the decisions that I would make if it was here. And so you have to be able to understand that that's the situation that you're going to be in, and work out a way to make those decisions for yourself in advance. We've seen this with divers, is another really classic example of this happening. So divers, and I'm not a diver, so any divers in the room, please correct me. If something goes wrong, there's quite a lot of documented evidence that they panic, and they'll actually, pull the regulator out of someone's mouth or do something completely crazy. And that's, again, because their brains are not operating like they are when they're sitting on the boat, calm and collected. They are panicking, and they're not responding correctly. And so this is exactly what happens in boardrooms as well, and I've seen this play out. And one of the things that I say to a lot of my clients is, make it really easy for them. Give them a checklist, your crisis management team. Give them a checklist of what they need to think through in an incident, so they know exactly what it is they've got to work through and decide. Don't leave it up to them to read through a massive document, because it won't work. Do exercises, rehearse that plan to make sure that you're in a situation where they feel comfortable with their role, and they are not coming up with it for the first time in a high-pressure incident where they are not equipped to handle it, because they will not make good decisions. And if your crisis management team make bad decisions, it's the techies that have to actually enact those bad decisions. So it's really important. The next point that I want to raise is picking the best tools. So when I'm climbing, I have a set of tools that I've decided are the best for my tools. So I pick the best ice axes that you can see here. I pick the best crampons. I pick double boots, so you might be able to see mountaineering boots. You have 2 boots, one inside of the other, and it's designed to try and stop your foot from getting frostbite because it's so intensely cold. It's also at altitude, so your body can't warm itself like it can here. So you buy the expensive boots, and they're really, really, really painfully expensive. But you buy them because you want to keep your toes, right? I buy those ice axes because they are the best. I buy the best crampons. But each and every tool that I buy has a drawback, so none of them are 100%. The crampons are the best crampons, but they're heavy. The ice axes are the best ice axes, but they're really expensive. So everything has a drawback. The boots are great, but I can only use the boots at the top of the mountain because they're too warm at the bottom, so now I have to bring multiple pairs of boots. Everything has a purpose, and everything has a drawback. I also, for those of you who are nerds like me, bring a pulse oximeter up with me to the mountains. So anybody who knows anything about oxygen in your body, I was told by a doctor actually that it shouldn't drop. You need to go to hospital at sea level if it drops below 95, and you'd be put on a ventilator at 90. And that's mine, sitting at 75 with a heart rate of 94, so not the picture of health at that moment in time on the mountain. But I bring all this stuff to give me the best possible chance, and my life often depends on the stuff that I have. And it's the same as security tools. You know, you've got to buy the best possible tools for the tasks that you need them for, but you've got to recognize that all of those tools have limits. And if you try and operate them outside of those limits, it's just not going to work. The classic example that I see play out almost always with like management boards or even like CTOs, not so much CTOs, CFOs, CEOs, is the concept of backups. And they think backups are this amazing, sort of almost mythical thing that exists that you've paid for. And that in the IT department exists this big red button that you press, and all of your problems just go away, and the backups come on, and everything's fine again. And we all know that that is very, very far from the reality of how that probably operates, right? But they believe that's what backups do. They believe that they've got this catch-all, save-all thing that means that they can make any decision under the sun, and it's all fine. And we know that's not the case. But if they don't know that's not the case, their decision-making in a crisis will be poisoned by the fact they think they have these backups. So make sure they understand that. And sometimes everything goes wrong. So I've lost friends. I've lost several friends in the mountains now, unfortunately. It's something that happens. It's something that can happen even to the best mountaineers. In fact, some of the best mountaineers have lost their lives, sadly. In this environment, same with cybersecurity, the line you tread can be very thin. I got it wrong on one of those mountains, got paid for it a little bit with some frostbite, but it could have easily gone worse, very, very easily. You're probably only 1 or 2 mistakes in that situation away from not coming back, unfortunately. And when I was actually in the camp that I showed you at the very first image, when you fall asleep and you're in your sleeping bag, all you can hear is avalanches happening around you, which is very unsettling. I knew they weren't going to hit my tent. It's still pretty unsettling. So there are lots of factors that can happen, and everything can change. Everything can go wrong. And that's the same in security. I've seen incidents happen where key people have been away, and there's this massive knowledge gap that now you can't fill in an incident because they knew how everything worked. Everything goes wrong at once. Key things aren't available anymore. So one of the things I say to people is exercise what you would do in an incident, let's say a ransomware attack, and go through it as if it was the worst possible time and situation to have a ransomware attack. So let's say that although this is very unlikely, you'd have no access to email, no access to Office 365, no access to Teams, your key people were away, your office was inaccessible from a flood. Think about like the absolute worst set of situations that could possibly happen all together at once and see how you deal with it. Because if you can deal with it in that situation, you're going to be able to deal with it in a situation that's far less extreme than that. So that was a whistle-stop tour of crevasses, high-altitude mountaineering, and crisis management within organizations. I crammed a lot in 15 minutes, and I've got 10 seconds left. So thank you very much, everyone. I don't think there's time for questions, but if you do have questions, come find me. I am loitering around. Please don't come and find me just to see the photos of the frostbite. Ideally something else offered into that conversation, but otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.